often do you get to interview the co-founders of the company and be able to ask them anything you want? Almost. But that's going to be fun. So really what we want to do is make sure that all of you get to see a little bit of the personal side also of both Marius and Gil. And so why don't I kick it off with a question that I know a lot of people have in mind. You know, we talk about innovation. You've talked about innovation in your speech here through it, and obviously you're innovators. So as inventors and innovators for the company, what does innovation mean to you? Want to start with you, Gil?
Okay, I thought I get a break a little bit after speaking for 20 minutes. But I think that innovation is really trying, I mean, our world around us is full of a lot of interesting things. We don't need to invent everything that was created. I don't know how, that's a debate, science, religion, but they are around us. I think innovation is trying to take the things that are around us and build something that we never thought can be done. And I think that's the daily task of somebody that innovates. No matter what field it is, if it's cybersecurity, taking the element that we know about computing, putting them together in a different way, that's innovation. Of course, it's done in every other field around us.
And maybe the angle maybe is, what is an innovator? Or what do you look for when you're trying to bring in employees or people or partners, et cetera, from innovation?
I think that innovation is also not just a technology angle, it also has a personal angle. Innovators are people that are trying things out of the ordinary, that they recognize an opportunity, they seize an opportunity, people that take chances, not everything succeeds.
Not change averse, not...
Exactly, exactly.
Fantastic. So innovation, obviously you were filled with innovation in the early 90s. What prompted you to get into the development of what became the firewall and now the gateways? What was the need at the time in the early 90s that drove that?
So the first idea when I thought about this idea was there's nothing to do with the internet and nothing to do with, I mean, it actually was in 1990, few years before people knew or thought about the internet, and that was, like many young Israel, like all young Israelis served in the army. I dealt with computers. By that time, even though I was really young, I was already several years with experience in computing, and my task was actually to connect two classified networks, one in this part of the building, one in the other part of the building, and connect them. Networks weren't existed back then and weren't connected, and keep them in such a way that the information doesn't leak between the two systems. I've tried to look around what's available in the market, what's available in routers, what's available in our system, couldn't find a good solution. And then I thought, let me build a very simple, fast, virtual machine with a language that I will write, that describe communication protocols, so it can be very flexible and can adapt to any change and can work very fast. And I implemented it, and that was a good experience. I left the army when I was 21, thought that's a good idea. I already wanted to build my own product, to be some sort of entrepreneur. But I thought that's not a very exciting market. Going convincing, the governments and so on, that there are new networks that we are just putting out. Remember, it was 1991, are not secured enough and needs to be compartmentalized. That's doable, but not very exciting. 2 years later, I saw the internet coming, and then everybody started asking, okay, we want to connect to this global network. Remember, that was the internet of '93, before the web was even invented. How do we connect? How do we keep all these students and all these universities outside? And then I said, guys, I have the perfect idea for that. I have this technology. And that's where I teamed with my two partners, Marius and Shlomo, and I told them, you remember my 3-year-old idea? Now there's a really exciting market that I thought will revolutionize the world. Most people that we spoke to actually didn't. We said, well, you're smart guys, nice idea, but this internet it's an academic market, nothing will happen out of it. We really insisted, and I think we had the right direction for the world.
And Marius, you continued to innovate afterwards through the go-to-market strategies. I think you ran Europe for a while. You've been through Asia. You did a lot of the things that are now my inheritance from the company and that we're driving through. So that must have been a thrilling time also at the beginning.
Yeah, and I think, excuse me for jumping forward, but I think that today the challenge is even bigger, because back then it was very difficult to convince partners and customers that our technology is superior. Today I think the challenge is even bigger, because It's a very complex story. It's not just packet filters or application gateways. Now the cyber threat, the landscape is extremely complicated, and to carry that message, to try and explain to customers how they are exposed and how to protect themselves is a very big challenge. And I think that the challenges now are immense, and I really look forward for our partners that are more sophisticated than the average partner to try and carry the gospel.
Yeah, no, good point. Now, when I think of the beginning days also, you know, I think of the name of the company, Checkpoint Software Technologies, right? And obviously the path as a software development organization has been very profitable, very speed of development's a lot better versus hardware platforms. Was that really the foresight at the time versus ASICs and hardware, you know?
So I think that's a very good question, and that's absolutely the right approach. Security is an ever-changing dynamic market. A new type of attack vector, a new threat, all of that, these are changing instantly in one day, and we need to react fast, and that's the nature of software. Software is changing, software can predict the market, software can be flexible, software can change on a daily basis. If I would to invest my resources about building a hardware architecture can take a very well-structured algorithm and accelerate it and make it more efficient, but they change every 3-5 years, not even that. If we look, for example, on the architectures that we use for hardware, the Intel architecture exists for the original one is 40 years old, the new one is more than 20 years old. We accelerate it, but the inherent architecture doesn't change. In security, we cannot change in a 5-year cycle or a 3-year cycle. We need to change in a 3-hour cycle, in a 3-day cycle, and so on. And that's why our focus today remains on how do we stay flexible, because security is an ever-changing market in a very big contrast to other markets like switching or routing, when you take the same protocol and try to do it better. And there, by the way, hardware is a great solution, a perfect solution, where you all came from companies like Cisco and so on. That's the right approach. Security is the opposite. It's about ever-changing environment, flexibility, and that's where software excels and Checkpoint is.
And we saw that through last week, I think, through a lot of the malware and the ransomware attacks. We'll talk about them in a minute, but how fast we're able to, you know, come back, react, and combat that through software versus if you were having to build hardware platforms as the key would be huge. Now, Marius, you were responsible for a lot of the go-to-market and the decisions early in the game to bring in partners and to drive through partnerships a lot of our go-to-market versus trying to create some type of a direct model or retail model. How important a lot of these folks here are our partners? How important was that at the time, and does it continue to be in our success, in our growth path?
So Checkpoint has a very clear, has had and has a very clear strategy of completely relying on partners to get our products to the market, to sell our products and to carry the gospel. Our partners are outnumbering us 10 to 1 or even more than that in the field. So our partners are extremely critical. If I was to take just a high-level approach, you know, we have the most secure product, the most comprehensive product, the most adapt, manageable product. We, just like survival of the fittest, we have the product that is most adapted and fits best the challenges of today. That's an easy message to carry, but we really look forward for our partners and customers to really understand, and even our existing customers to tell their friends about our abilities, and then you really have to go 1 layer deeper and even 2 and 3 layers deeper to try and explain and convince people about how phenomenal this technology and architecture is. So that has been the case right from the beginning. This is the case today as well.
Fantastic. So you're very important to us, and I'll never leave without believing that for a minute. Now, if we jump into current events a little bit, I mentioned the attacks of last week. So I guess what a lot of people have in mind, how predictable was that, or how surprised were you by the depth, how global the attacks were last week, and how they were cross-industry, right? Not just attacking one specific area in financials, et cetera, but across many industries. Did it surprise you, or
So obviously last weekend and what started in Friday as a very massive attack was a big attack that I don't know if anybody anticipated, but there was no surprise for me. I mean, this is the exact same things we're talking about for the last few years. An attack that's using very sophisticated tools, some were even invented or first built by superpowers, by governments, by the NSA in the US, and some that were developed by the hackers, trying to attack everyone, not necessarily very targeted, and moving very fast. So for us, it's like, I mean, it's like a doctor in the hospital. If you get somebody that gets sick, you say, oh my God, I've never seen it. If you're working at the hospital, there's no surprise to you that people get sick and when you need to do something about it. For me, the main feeling was a big frustration because I know that there is so much that can be done to prevent these attacks. And my frustration is that for the last few years, I'm saying to everyone, use these technologies, use advanced threat prevention, it will prevent that. And yet, it's far from being 100% of the customers for using that. As we said, is between 4 to 7% of customers that have started using these technologies. So for me, it was very frustrating to see that we have the solution, but not enough people are using it.
I'm using a formula. There's a formula that says that for every 1% of exposure, you have to multiply it by 10 to understand the risk. So if you have a product that gives you 95% coverage, you're actually 50% vulnerable.
Right.
Okay? So it was really no surprise because the coverage, the security coverage that some customers have or some products that are utilized, they have, leaves all of the customers quite exposed, even I would say 100% exposed. Yeah. And the ransomware is a very annoying thing, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, seriously, because the attacks that go undetected, these are the real dangerous ones. You know, if you're a pharmaceutical company and your formulas are being stolen, that's far bigger damage. Or corrupted, that's a far bigger damage than just paying $300 in bitcoins.
Yeah. Now, we've been in security since the early 90s, right, against the internet, and there's been a tremendous amount of investment done by companies everywhere, and yet we're in 2017, and this happens, and we find, 4 or 5% of the companies worldwide, organizations worldwide, really are ready for it. Why, in your opinion, why is that? Why that kind of lag versus the hackers? And what should companies really be doing other than what you just presented, right?
So first, I think that's part of human nature. We tend to gravitate towards our known spaces. We know how to deal with this and this technology, so that's what we will do, and we will do it better, and we will improve, instead of understanding that we need to break into new frontiers. Now, obviously, I've gone through all the reasons and excuses that people use to not use new technologies, and yes, there are real issues. We need to consolidate the system. We need to build one uniform architecture. We need to make it easy to deploy and use and efficient to do, and I think that's what we are doing. But I think part of it is also for all of us to understand we need to move forward. We need to implement these new technologies everywhere, every day, and we need to get out of the comfort zone. I'm glad to say that we've did some of that in Checkpoint 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and even 10 years ago. And these developments and these innovations lead to the products that we have today. These products weren't invented yesterday. The development started, as I said, long time ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm proud to say that we have the tools today. The question, how fast can all of us and all of you can get them deployed and really effective in your environments?
I'd like to take the analogy that Gil just made, and the internet is about 20 years old, and just like a human, at 20 years old, you feel very solid, strong. You don't think that you're gonna have cancer or things like that. And this is the sense, I think, that most of the enterprises on the internet have. It's something new. It's probably good. It's okay. Life is rosy. But even when you're 20 years old, you go into a car, you get into a car, you buckle up, you have airbags, and you have security because an accident might happen. Right. And what we see nowadays is that accidents are constantly happening. You don't know when you're going to be hit by a car or a bus on the highway. And this is something that has to sink into the internet.
So if you're somebody tasked with protecting the data, protecting the entities for a company, you're a CISO or you're part of the security infrastructure, what do you do tomorrow morning or today? Like,
I mean, I think it's think simple, think new, and try to consolidate. Again, don't try to go back and saying, but this product doesn't upgrade. And if I would start an architecture from ground up, this is what I build. I think it's infinity. I think it's what we do, obviously, but I'm biased here. But I think that's the right solution. One single, unified, consolidated architecture, threat prevention everywhere, protecting everything, the network, the endpoint, the mobile, the cloud, and start from there. Then, if there needs to be compromises, do the compromises, but don't start from, I can't upgrade, I can't do that. And I think, by the way, that investment of building something new, in many cases, may be easier, simpler, cheaper than trying to adapt your 10, 15-year-old, Cisco network or some other company networks or even checkpoint environment and to morph it into the future. Start from the future and connect it to today rather than the other way around.
It's a daunting task, but what I've learned from both of you and from several of the developers is think of it as an intrinsic layer on top of the network. Don't think of it as a component of the network. It's not a device in the network. It's software and technologies that sit on top as its own architecture, now branded as Xfinity. Right? And I think that's an important consideration. You leave here thinking, I build a security architecture, and you start simple, and you drive it through, thinking of the malware and thinking of those, rather than thinking of it just as gateways within the piece. It makes a lot of difference. So, just a few more questions before I just want to get a little more personal. So you've been, first of all, nice suit, really nice.
New one, yes.
Milan
is
bought in Milan.
City.
And
bought it yesterday.
You're going to have to tell me where the tailor is. I like it. But so, have you had a chance to go through Milan? What's your favorite restaurant so far? Have you found one yet?
Obviously I like food, so I'm experimenting all the time. And there's plenty of good places in Milan, not just one and not one style. I'd probably recommend two at this point. One that's completely innovative, completely new molecular cooking, that's called VUN.
Right.
I don't know how to pronounce it in Italian. That's truly.
I think that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other one is in a place called Italy. It's like a big market for all Italian-made stuff. And that restaurant gives also, again, if we talk about innovation, new interpretation to all the food there is local, all the ingredients are from Italy. If you ask for Coca-Cola, you'll get a local vendor. If you ask for lemonade, you'll get something from Portofino. But they give a really nice interpretation to Italian food, and that restaurant is called, actually in English it's read like Alice in Italy.
Yeah.
In Italian, I think they say it Alice. So I don't know what's the right, probably Alice is the right name.
Yeah.
And that's a very nice place I've been to, I think 2 days ago.
Did you have a chance to experiment in any of them? Or?
No, only
No?
the gym in my hotel.
The gym in your hotel? Yeah.
He's the healthy one, you can
kinda
see.
like me. Well, that's it, gentlemen. Thank you very much for the time, and I hope you found this interesting. It's always neat to have a chance to chat with you guys, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very